moving on then to student recruitment, this will be a bit shorter, I guess. You know, as I said, we don't nationally, the statistics are going up. My concern is that there are still students who would really love economics and would be very successful at economics who are put off by perhaps misconceptions of the subject. I mean, how many 15-year-olds actually know what economics is? How many adults actually know what economics is? How many teachers go around saying, well, economics is a bit like business? It's also not classed as a facilitating subject by Russell Group, and that's because you don't need economics to do an economics degree. I think I read a stat that 80%-ish of students doing economics A-level have 80% of economics undergrads did economics A-level. So it's not, it's not huge. It's not quite as overwhelming as we'd expect. We've moved to a 3-subject model, which means that taking a new subject is a bit more of a risk. Maybe in the 4-subject model, people would take it as their 4th and then end up really liking it. So it's less of a volume issue that I guess I'm talking about, and more of a representation issue, and how and whether we get the right students, because I'm worried about those who would really enjoy it and miss out, as well as those who pick it because they think it's going to be like politics or they think it's going to be like business and it's not. And then perhaps they're not that's not helping their outcomes. It's not helping their life chances. I think part of that problem maybe comes from our taster sessions. And it's very difficult to do taster sessions on stuff that, to make it accessible, sometimes we then take the economics out. I think Andrew's just mentioned gender bias. I was looking at some stats about at university, I think it's about 30% to 70%. So that's an issue. There's also an issue with racial representation as well, and that's important because people who are very high up in economics and writing the economics research and doing the policy advice, obviously that if they have certain views, and that's what's going to be put forward to policy. And there's some research that suggests that males and females have very different. Male and female economists often give very different policy advice, and I realize this is a huge issue. I'm very mindful not to kind of just narrow, to cram it into a tiny topic, but how do we just make sure that we're not harming that and that we're not perhaps putting forward those misrepresentations that are causing that issue? So first of all, I'm just going to just talk very quickly about the requirements that we all require just for maths and English. I think it's interesting to see what the other schools do, and how also we might deal with that this year, given that everything's going to be a bit different with GCSEs and how much we trust that. How we represent our subject, either at open days, if people are, how we talk about our subject at open days, if anyone does any active recruitment like assemblies. And obviously that's going to be very different if you're at a fee college versus if you're part of a school sixth form, how that interacts. And how we act in the first month of the course to kind of maybe weed out some students who aren't going to be, who would be more successful in other subjects. Obviously, if they're really enjoying it, that's great. But sometimes students take it thinking it's going to be one thing and it doesn't live up to those expectations. How we sort that out. And any insights really into the perceptions of girls or minority groups and or either their perceptions of the subject or their perceptions of their ability to succeed in the subject. And just if anyone has any just thoughts for us to start to think about is I guess there. So very quick poll on the screen, just as your entry requirements. If you don't know, just put cannot answer. It's anonymous, so I can't see who's written what, so I'm not gonna...
I can't see how we answer that, Isabel.
Oh, can you not?
It's all in progress.
Scroll down and there'll be a submit because there's 3 questions. Sorry.
Scroll down. I'm on a phone, you see. It doesn't work the same. I can't see it on a phone.
Not to worry. We'll Okay, I'll just leave it for an extra minute.
Yeah, I put in the chat as well. We asked for grade 7s.
Grade 7s, that's high. Are you at a selective school?
Yeah.
Semi-selective.
Yeah.
Okay. I will end that poll there. Okay, so you should be able to, can you see those results on your screen? Lots of grade 5s and 6s. And obviously Helen's just added grade 7. Grade 5s and 6s, mainly grade 5. That's interesting. So slightly higher maths requirements than English requirements. Most people take that with a pinch of salt, but some people are very strict on that. That's interesting. Okay, I'll pop that away. There we go. Okay, so first of all, any discussion? Does anyone have any comments on requirements or anything like that they need to say on entrance requirements? No. Oh yes, Matthew. Sorry. Oh, you're muted, Matthew.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, no, really interested about the grade requirements. I wonder what people thought about this year. My school brought in the grade requirement for economics that they had to have a 7 in maths. It's one of those sort of myths, if you like, where I think people just think that economics is obviously going to be lots and lots of maths. And I felt quite frustrated that there was that link made.
Yeah, it's interesting because often it's a requirement at university, isn't it? Lots of universities require maths over economics, but it does change students' view on what the subject is going to be. Ben?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that at all. I try not to have any pre-requirements, and I'd much prefer them just to be genuinely interested in the course. But we all know that the sort of the maths has been taken out of economics over the years, and like you say, it's at undergraduate level. There's still a fair amount of data handling though, but yeah, I think it's the logical mathematical mind that helps rather than the pure, core mathematical skills. So I think for those, you do tend to see the bright mathematicians. It's not about the numbers, it's just that logical mind. I had an old colleague many years ago who used to insist that we dropped the maths requirement and put the 7 or the A grade or whatever it was in physics. He found there was a stronger correlation between abstract physics stuff, I don't know what, but he swore by the fact that if you relied on their physics grade, it was a much better indicator of success than maths. So make of that what you will.
That's really interesting, Nicola.
I find, and I think that links in really well with what you've just said, Ben, is that my mathematicians understand the diagrams so much more quickly and have a much deeper and more solid understanding, particularly when you're talking about gradients and shifting curves, and they seem to pick that up much more quickly. And I mean, we ask for 5s. I've been told I can ask for 6s, but I'd end up with a class of about 4 then, unfortunately. But I find that really interesting, Ben. That I think I'm going to look at that and see, because that's that kind of thinking, is it? If you think about your physics and that kind of abstract thinking, and I think that does come across in the maths. So I do think it's really still important to have good mathematicians in your class. That's
really interesting, and I mean, I've maybe got a slightly different perspective here because I trained as a maths teacher. My degree's in economics, but I trained as a maths teacher. So I know the maths courses that they're doing quite well, and I know that lots of other people do joint teaching. And it's interesting that it's only certain parts of the maths course that I think indicate their thinking in economics. So, and actually part of their data handling actually doesn't need to be that, they don't need to know all about how to draw a histogram and a lot of that kind of knowledge element. But if they can, if they can solve problems in geometry, for example, that's sometimes a bit of help, even though there is no geometry in economics, but that kind of thinking. But equally, I imagine I'm not the only one. I let in someone with a grade 4 one year, and she ended up being my best economist. So it's really interesting that is an indicator of the type of thinking, but not necessarily of their ability. Moving on then to how we represent economics to students. Am I the only one that thinks there might be? It might be it might just be me thinking that there's a representation of problem in economics of how students perceive the subject, because a lot of them, if you ask them what it's about, they'll say money. I'm seeing some nods. That's good. Ben, you were going to say something.
No, I think I was getting slightly ahead of you to really talk about sort of actively recruiting rather than the right perception. So I think I'll just come back in a little while.
Okay. Okay, so when everyone's discussing economics, how do you get across what the subject is in just a couple of sentences at an open evening? Does anyone have any gems that they use, or ways that they can get that across? Because it is difficult, isn't it? It's quite go on, Nicola.
Sorry, I'm saying quite a lot.
Right.
I always talk about it's about decisions. I always talk about decision making and choices and going through it that way, because I just think that's fundamentally what it is.
Yeah, and taking it back to the economic problem a bit. Do you kind of mention that? Yeah.
Well, we do, but I because it's open evening, whatever's in the news, we'll talk about some of the macro policies. But I always do bring it back to you've made a choice and what are the implications of that. And then we talk about, we'll look at it mathematically, we'll do diagrams, etc. But I do kind of keep that as a focus.
That's really interesting because it's quite a clear way to take it across. Any other thoughts on that, and then we'll go back to Ben on. Oh, go on, Helen.
Mute. There we go. Yeah, I was just going to say that I do something very similar to Nicola and talk about scarcity and choices and resources, and then pick up whatever's recently been in the news. Especially if you say to them, if you've ever heard Evan Davis on the news, or Faisal Islam, or Robert Peston, and not understood what they were talking about, after 2 years of an economics course, you most likely will. And that gets a kind of an interest. But at open evenings, I also show them probably the oligopoly diagram and say, if you're not running screaming yet, then this might be for you. If you're prepared to learn what this means, then I can teach you. So
it's an interesting hot water test, actually. That's really good.
Some of them, because you say, we want a grade whatever in maths, some of them think it's all about maths. And of course it isn't. And although there's a correlation between conceptual understanding and being able to understand some maths or physics concepts, because we've talked about maths, they get put off by it or think it's all mathematical when it obviously isn't.
Yeah, absolutely. That's interesting. That's interesting. Right. So if we go on to the bit, so let's kind of merge together how we recruit students and also how we ensure that recruitment, as far as possible, is representative. Maybe how we recruit, if we change our approach to recruit girls or minority groups, etc. Ben?
There we go. I'm pretty shameless when it comes to recruiting. Like you, I was quite concerned about the move to the sort of the 3A level approach, because as you absolutely said, Isabel, it was often that fourth subject, and we found that once people took it on, they loved it and they would always continue it, but it was just making sure that they pick it as a third subject at least, given it's the risk. I think that the whole department's pretty key here, and I think the whole department, in terms of what they do in school, very important. I appreciate we're all from sort of different schools and different sized departments, but I do strongly encourage my department to be actively involved in almost every area of school. So I've got a couple that are quite heavily involved in the sporting side and run sports teams and so on. One of my big success, well, not my big success, I can't claim anything for it, but we've been quite fortunate to have a female choir member who's got lots and lots of the girls involved, especially the singers. So you can just sort of rely on your department as much as possible, and then just shameless plugging of everything that's going on there. I think, because we are talking about our jobs, we want people to study our subject, and we are biased and so on. So the Student Investor Challenge has always been a great one. Open that up to the entire school. We don't offer GCSE business or economics, so I have got no route into the younger kids whatsoever. It's purely A level. So Student Investor Challenge right at the start of the year, get almost the entire school signed up to it, and they don't all complete it and they don't all take it seriously, but actually just getting those few teams that top the leaderboards, make it to national semi-finals, finals and so on, it's great. We also spend just at the end of lower sixth, and again it probably depends on how you can get away with your teaching, but we do our internal assessments in lower sixth, and then we spend a week or two, well probably just a week, writing the departmental magazine. So the kids write articles about lots of areas of their choice, put it all together in departmental magazine, and that gets produced, and that's fairly shamelessly publicized right across school to parents, social media, all the rest of it. I've got no shame in doing it, but the pupils produce it, and then it's quite a bumper edition now because we've got some really, really big numbers, and numbers are growing. So yeah, a bit of shameless promotion. I've got no harm in.
And if you've got such big volumes, of students or if you're casting the net so widely,
Yeah.
how do you then make sure that they're the right students, or do you take the approach that actually,
I genuinely don't. I really don't. If they want to study the subject, that's enough for me always. And I know, and I'm very public about that with sort of line managers and heads and so on, that we will take anyone. And I mean, I do work at an independent schools. We've got selective kids here and quite able kids. But I would much prefer kids who want to do it, that may even struggle with the course a little bit, and you help them along the way rather than be restrictive.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of saying, they're not good enough to do this subject.
I think my point is more that I know lots of kids that perhaps interested in finance who'd really thrive in the Student Investor Challenge, who would find 95% of the course boring. So I think maybe it's casting the net widely as you've done, and then just being really clear about what the actual, cast the net to get them in, and then be really clear about what the course the course is. And actually I think it depends as well on your course, because I do EdExcel and there's no finance in it at all, which is a bit bizarre. Manisha, was your hand up or are you just flapping around? No,
sorry.
Any more thoughts on any of that? Matthew, sorry.
Yeah, no, I just another idea. I mean, I really like the Student Investor Challenge as well, but I did a lot of work at the start of this academic year, having a joint school trip with geography. So I think promotion within other social sciences really sort of a bit like globalization and all the development theory with that. With geography, that I really sort of promoted with the year 10 and 11s what A-level economics was about